I was told by my grandfather, or no, sorry, by my grandmother, that it was a gentleman who lived down at the bottom of the village. Was he working in the town? And when he was coming home at night, he said that once he turned onto the Grimshaw single track road from the main Lochs Harris Road, that he was getting followed by a ghostly figure. That's what I had heard. Um, that's the bit that my grandmother told me. And then I think I read a book, possibly, as I mentioned, by the late Frank Thompson, where he picked up on the story and said about how this man had been very much frightened by what was happening. And that I think that now I read as a child that he once or twice he had taken his boat back to the town, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
He wasn't going to risk it on the motorbike again.
Yeah, but that he was followed more than once by this figure. That would, and no matter how fast he would ride on his bike, the figure would keep up with him. I think it would reach a stream or a bridge, and then it would vanish. Not only was the Grimshaw single track supposed to be haunted by this figure, but the stretch of the main road down to Crickavotic. And Audie told me stories that if you went there on a brilliant summer's night and sat there, that the figure would appear to you there. But apparently, I think it was in a book by a 19th century vicar of St. Peter's, Hely Hutchinson. He recorded that in the 19th century that local people were scared to walk along what's now the Lochs Road past Crickavotic because of a ghost. And they said it was a ghost of a schoolboy that had been killed.
I'm not a trained folklorist, but I do swap a lot of stories, luckily, in quite a few countries. And it's, for me, fascinating to compare, but very much a motif that keeps coming back again and again is the ghost that cannot settle until either his fate, her fate, is truly known to the world, or more so, steps towards justice are taken. So in this case, although the body is found, there are no clues as to the culprit. So scholars, they should know better, but it seems a lot better to go bird's nesting out at Arnish. And an egg of a rarer bird blown is quite a valuable thing for a collector, and these boys aren't daft and they know it. And perhaps one of them had the find and the other thought they should share it, who knows, but there was a quarrel. And what's definite is that in the heat of the moment, one of them picked up a stone and swung it, and that was it. So it's too late. He's killed his friend. But he finds what looks like some old bones nearby. Maybe there's antlers, maybe they're deer bones. And they enable him to dig a shallow grave, and he buries his friend in the peat. But he knows it's only a matter of time before he's missing and he'll be noticed. And everybody knows they were together, inseparable. So he knows to get aboard the next ship, a Baltic trader that's leaving the island. And it's not difficult to tell a story that he's a young fellow looking for an apprenticeship at sea, and off he goes. He does his apprenticeship. But it's only a matter of time before one ship he's on is heading back to the great international seaport of Stornoway. And he could probably have found an excuse for not going ashore, but you can excuse imagining that there was a compulsion to go ashore. And of course, the place where you would get something to eat, something to drink, would be a pub, which would be right on the waterfront, in full view of Arnish Moor. So he must, as he's taken what would have been a horn spoon in the pub to whatever stew was served up there, he must be looking out the door, the open door, to the very site of that murder. Some say that he was behaving so strangely that they got a bit worried about it and asked what was wrong, and he said something about the blood on the spoon. And some say this, and some say that. But whatever, he was so disturbed that when pushed, he confessed to what he'd done.
I did hear my grandmother, I'm sure, say that some of the local people thought that the body was the body of a cattle drover. That was another theory that the people had, because again, there's a motif throughout the Western Isles of cattle drovers and peddlers meeting a grisly end.
I know several of the peddler, and there's a few of the things there, because he would have had something that was worth waylaying for.
I think, well, the peddler would certainly tie in with what my grandmother shared and other stories from the Western Isles that have spots that were famously haunted because a peddler had allegedly been attacked for his wares there. And of course, the motif was that he would appear to future travellers and explain what had happened to him in order for there to be some type of justice.
Yes.
But it seems to tie in with the possibility of somebody who maybe had money and was at risk on that lonely stretch of moor.
So it's an agent of some kind, somebody carrying out a service for a landlord or an official, but not wealthy in their own right. And for me, the never-ending fascination, the need to explain, the need to have some clue as to who was that person, what was their story, what was going on in their mind before this terrible act happened. What about the murderer? What about the person who did that terrible act? And the interesting thing for me about Frank's version of the story is the guilt side of it, and the psychology of the person who committed the terrible act, and the guilt and the aftermath.
No, Ian mentioned there about how the psychological aspect of the storytelling is important for him, and I suppose it is for myself too. And as you asked me, the spiritual side is obviously there as well, but also the historical side. I'm fascinated by the history of the islands, and I'm aware that there's not that much hard evidence available to us about what went on in the 17th and the 18th centuries. So to have this small but significant window into the culture of this time is invaluable.
Purse with no coins, socks with plenty darns, but no shoes. wear on the shoulder, but no sign of a plaid. How much patching can a man of 24 carry in his own lifetime? We walk the stories on, but the stocking, the undershirt, might have come to him with its layer of provenance. A spoon of horn, 4 rivets, a brace of quills, beard comb, Viking style, the fine span and the quick separated. A hand-stitched bonnet, the casting off like a signature. A garment so well made, but a single button replaced on a band of plaid on the only pocket. A lot of strain on the shoulders, a darker addition at the right arm.